From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I have no doubt that Somalia is today the worst humanitarian disaster that we face in the world.
Be the worst humanitarian disaster in the world. We'll look at the famine in Somalia and the Horn of Africa. We'll also look at the CIA's secret sites in Somalia. A new investigative report by Jeremy Scahill reveals the CIA is using a secret facility in Somalia for counterterrorism, as well as an underground prison in the Somali capital of Mogadishu. Then the phone hacking scandal engulfing Rupert Murdoch's media empire has crossed the Atlantic and could impact Murdoch's maze of interests in the United States. We'll speak with Kevin Zeese of ProtectOurElections.org. He's called on the FBI and the Securities Exchange Commission to launch criminal and civil investigations into possible prosecution under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We'll also speak with Media Matters' Elise Hogue, then to Egypt.
I have come here today because I do not feel like the revolution has accomplished anything. I don't feel as if the revolution has achieved the results we have been waiting for.
It's the largest protest since the uprising. For nearly a week, Egyptian protesters have camped out in Tahrir Square, calling for the demands of the revolution to be met. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell has offered what he calls a last choice option in the impasse over raising the federal debt limit. McConnell's proposal would require President Obama to seek congressional approval for increasing the debt ceiling by up to $2.5 trillion in 3 installments. For each request, Obama would have to propose an equal amount in spending cuts to balance out the funds he'd be seeking. Administration officials and Democratic leaders say they'll review McConnell's plan, but the proposal faces its toughest challenge in the House, where Republicans say they will not approve any plan that does not impose massive spending cuts. Speaking to CBS News, President Obama said he cannot guarantee Social Security checks will be mailed out if an agreement fails in August.
You tell the folks at home that no matter what happens, the Social Security checks are going to go out on August the 3rd. There are about $20 billion worth of Social Security checks that have to go out the day after the government is supposedly going to go into default.
Well, this is not just a matter of Social Security checks. These are veterans' checks. These are folks on disability and their checks. There are about 70 million checks that go out.
Can you guarantee as president those checks will go out on August the 3rd?
I cannot guarantee that those checks go out on August 3rd if we haven't resolved this issue, because there may simply not be the money in the coffers to do it.
Senator McConnell's surprise proposal came just hours after he told the Senate chamber he doesn't foresee a debt deal so long as President Obama's in office.
I hope the economists are wrong, and that our economy will continue to grow over the next year and a half to buy us time to tackle the problems we face. But after years of discussions and months of negotiations, I have little question that as long as this president is in the Oval Office, a real solution is probably unattainable.
Senator McConnell's apparent change of heart may have been influenced by corporate pressure. On Tuesday, a coalition of business executives and lobbyists issued a statement imploring lawmakers to strike a deal on raising the debt ceiling or risk harming the U.S. economy. The signatories included hundreds of top executives and groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable. Business Roundtable President John Engler said, quote, "The business community in large numbers is saying to our leaders in Washington, do your job." The Libyan government's warning it faces a major water shortage if NATO continues to block delivery of needed supplies. Libyan Agriculture Minister Abdulmajid Aguwood said water production has dropped to nearly 1/4 its levels before the NATO bombing campaign.
Out of 2 million cubic meters a day, the production is only more or less about 450,000. Because we were depending since few months, since the main network have been cut, we were depending just on the power plant in Sarir. Out of the 6 turbines in Sarir power plant, only 1 right now is working. Not because we don't want to switch on the other 5, because the other 5 needs maintenance, needs spare parts.
NATO, meanwhile, has announced it will continue bombing Libya during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan if the Gaddafi regime carries on with attacks. NATO spokesperson Mike Bracken was asked about the bombing with Ramadan approaching next month.
We need to wait and see whether the Gaddafi forces continue to shell and inflict harm on the people of Libya. If they do, and we believe that there is risk to the lives of the Libyan people, to the men, women and children could be slaughtered or attacked, then I think it would be highly appropriate for the protection of those lives to continue. And NATO would use the mandate that it has to protect those lives.
The UN's top official on torture has expressed new concern over the Obama administration's thwarting of his effort to meet with alleged U.S. military whistleblower Bradley Manning. In a statement released by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Juan Mendez says, quote, "I need to ascertain whether the conditions he was subjected to for several months in Quantico amounted to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. For that, it's imperative I talk to Mr. Manning under conditions where I can be assured he is being absolutely candid." Manning was transferred from a prison at Quantico Marine Base in Virginia to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas in April. It's widely believed he suffered extreme and unusual confinement in Virginia, including denial of exercise, social interaction, sunlight, and at times forced nudity. More than 100 environmental activists rallied at the office of Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer Tuesday, protesting a number of carbon-intensive projects throughout the state. The activists called on Schweitzer to halt construction of TransCanada's Keystone XL pipeline and end ExxonMobil megaload shipments bound for the Alberta tar sands. 5 people were arrested and charged with trespassing and obstruction after they locked their arms in a mock pipeline made of PVC pipe and took up position in a hallway.
I'm from Montana. I grew up 60 miles away in Great Falls, and I cherish Montana. I cherish the beauty here, and I know that a lot of people from all over the country think of this as being like God's country, and it really is like a unique place. And Governor Schweitzer is catering to big oil, allowing for bigger and bigger pipelines that are jeopardizing that.
Montana Governor Schweitzer eventually agreed to speak to the protesters, but refused their calls to renounce support for the Keystone pipeline. The action follows the rupturing of an ExxonMobil pipeline near Montana's Yellowstone River earlier this month, leaking as much as 42,000 gallons of crude oil. The British government's joined efforts to block Rupert Murdoch's bid for broadcaster B-Sky-B, dashing his hopes of a rapid expansion in television as the scandal over phone hacking by one of his newspapers grows. The British Parliament's expected to pass a non-binding measure pressuring Murdoch to withdraw his takeover attempt. Labour leader Ed Miliband said British lawmakers are responding to public outcry.
This is an opportunity for the House of Commons to show it understands the depth of public concern. It understands the scale of outrage there is, and it understands the fundamental point that we cannot have Rupert Murdoch expand his reach in British broadcasting while these allegations are still being investigated and as they come out.
Rupert Murdoch is now facing pressure in the U.S. with calls for investigations of his media conglomerate for possible prosecution under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We'll have more on the Murdoch empire and the engulfing scandal after headlines. The International Monetary Fund is calling on Italy to adopt a new round of austerity measures in the face of a mounting debt crisis. Italy is expected to become the next European country to seek a bailout from international lenders, following Ireland, Greece, and Portugal. In election news, the Democratic Party has announced President Obama and the Democratic National Committee raised a combined $86 million between April and June, far surpassing a $60 million target. The amount was nearly triple Obama's personal fundraising record for the same quarter. Democrats have held on to a House seat in Southern California after a bitterly contested race. Democrat Janice Hahn bested Republican Craig Huey for the seat previously held by former Democratic Congressmember Jane Harman. And the U.S. has deported a Guatemalan man believed to have been involved in a 1982 massacre that killed 162 people. Pedro Pimentel-Rios is accused of murdering human rights abuses for his alleged participation in the Las Dos Eras massacre. A former member of Guatemala's notorious U.S.-backed special forces, Pimentel-Rios is believed to have taken part in killing scores of Guatemalan villagers, including women and children, who were strangled, beaten with sledgehammers, and thrown down a well. Pimentel-Rios is the fourth former Guatemalan death squad member living in the U.S. to be linked to the massacre and subsequently targeted for deportation. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.